was the first time you really felt like you had a place in Hollywood? Well, being a development executive, it's a very different trajectory, I think, than everyone else up here. I think one moment where I had this feeling, so growing up, I was a performer as well, acting and singing and dancing, and at one point I was like, I'm going to Juilliard, I'm going to Broadway. I was very disciplined, and I let that dream go, but I would say that Whoopi Goldberg was always my North Star. There weren't a lot of dark-skinned performers, and she was everything to me. And about 3 years ago, she came in for a pitch. And just sitting across the table from her was so incredible, and realizing that I had the buying power. I was in a position of authority of like, I could say yes or no to what her current dream was at the time. And we developed a relationship, and I went to The View and spent some time with her, and she was telling me that she was feeling like at her age, she was feeling left behind in the business. She felt like she wasn't currently able to do the kind of projects that she wanted to do, and she had all these, original ideas, and she was looking to me to be able to take those and run with them. And that was a really humbling and exciting and just really awe-inspiring moment of something coming full circle, and her being inspired to see me in a position that she had, hadn't come up seeing, and being able to have that moment, I feel like was really, really special.
That's so cool.
Yeah. it was pretty awesome.
You got an award winner.
Yeah, it was pretty great.
Oh my gosh. I always have been the kind of person, even in middle school and high school, who people would be around me, but I never really felt like I belonged. Like I felt like people would be around me for multiple reasons, but not necessarily for who I was. And so I don't ever feel like I don't ever know if I felt specifically like I have a place here. But I think that I would be naive to say that I don't have a home in this town. I think that would be very silly. And so the moment I think that probably would be maybe it was between the Bratz movie and Tyler Perry, because with the Bratz movie, I didn't get that part originally. I didn't get the part. I thought I wasn't good enough. And Avi Arad, who's like, Master Marvel, he decided later that he was gonna cast me in that role. And that's the role that ended up getting me onto the Tyler Perry sitcom. And I don't know, I guess just being wanted in that way in this town made me feel like I had a place. That's a really good question. Yeah. There's no Whoopi Goldberg in my answer.
Yeah, I don't have a Whoopi. But I do have a Will Packer. So Will gave me my very first internship when I moved to LA. I met Will when I was an undergrad at Florida A&M. And I went up to Will because they were promoting Stump the Yard at the time. And I said, hey, I want to be a filmmaker. And he asked if I had ever made a film, and I said no. And he said, go make a film and then come talk to me. So I spent my entire senior year making my first film. I sent it to him, and he gave me an internship on Takers. So I came to LA. I was actually already in LA, and I got a call from his assistant. I had been in LA for 2 weeks. His assistant called and said, hey, we're doing this film. We want to offer you this internship, but it's going to require you to, come to LA. And I'm like, I'm already here. And so I really started out, from the, week 2 of being in the city, kind of in the Hollywood system, working at a studio, and I transitioned from that internship right into a production assistant job, and then I became an executive assistant to one of the creative executives. So I have been around the industry, and as a result, I kind of always felt at home.
For me, this business was entirely foreign to me until I moved here. I moved here for the weather. So I think it was even, it was right. But it was even more of like a journey to find where you fit, what your place is. So for me, it was, I'd say when I wasn't even promoted yet. I was an assistant working for my second boss within the company, and I had identified this journalist that I really, really just was taken with as a writer. And I emailed him, I pursued him, I sat down, we really hit it off, and I said, do you really, have you ever considered writing TV? And he said, yeah, but I don't really think, he's a person of color, he really didn't think the business was for him. So we worked out just really what his script would be, and I shared it with people. We really busted our ass and put the effort in to get his work there, and everybody loved him, but nobody wanted to hire him just yet. And I remember a phone call with him where he says, "Hey man, is this a boondoggle? Just keep it real with me." He was going through some tough times, and he was like, "If I should just hang it up, let me know." And 3 weeks later, he got that first job working for Larry Wilmore on The Nightly Show. And his career has really taken off leaps and bounds ever since. But it was that moment of validation that somebody that I identified that wasn't even of this business, that actually really reminded me of myself in that way, that I could find a way in here and say, "Hey man, you belong too," made me feel like I belonged. So that was my moment if I really look back at it.
Was there ever a person who blatantly told you that you have no place in this industry? How did you respond? This was a nice little setup.
I would say no for me, but I did have someone say, "I don't know how to help you." I met this woman in a coffee shop, and we started talking, and I discovered she was an executive at a pretty successful production company, and it was a production company. It was under the banner of like an A-list star in this town, and so she was someone that I really wanted to be kind of connected to, but because I was a multi-hyphenate, she was like, "Yeah, I don't really know what to do with you, because if you were a writer, I could say, send me, your samples. I could read your scripts. If you were a director, maybe I could check out your reel, or if you were an actor, I could call you in. But I don't know what to do with you." And so that left me in a place of kind of feeling like maybe I didn't belong, in just the setup of Hollywood and kind of the system and the structure of the way things work. And so as a result, I felt like I had to go the indie route if I was going to be a multi-hyphenate, if I was going to be the writer, the director, and the actor, because at the time Hollywood didn't really celebrate I think being a multi-hyphenate at the time. So I think that's the closest experience that I had to someone kind of telling me that I didn't belong, but in hindsight, or maybe I'll say if we fast forward to after we got those 11 Daytime Emmys, she reached out to me and she said, "I didn't know how to help you because you didn't exist yet." And so just realizing sometimes we gotta find our own path, and oftentimes people don't see it until you do it, until you show them. Unfortunately, a lot of folks like to say that a lot of the people, the execs up top, they don't have great imaginations, that you really just have to show them, you have to lay it out, for them. There are folks who have vision, who can spot talent, before you land this really great role or before you write this really great script. But oftentimes you really just have to show and prove before people believe that you are who you say you are.
Yeah. It's hard for me to look at any individuals that I would allow to have that much weight over my career or my place in it. There's definitely been sticky situations, I think, in offices and stuff like that. But for me, it's always a more systemic conversation, and it's hard to answer that question without thinking of it that way. If you look at who development executives are, if people even know who they are, because we're kind of like the opaque part of the business a little bit. But if you really think about, who is the very last person who can decide, are we making that show, are we not making that show, are we buying it, are we not buying it, are we gonna program it, are we gonna push it, is it coming back for another season? If you look at any deadline article or breaking news and just look at who's moving around to different companies and always getting these big announcements, it's 9 times out of 10 a white man. Maybe a white woman might be sprinkled in, but most of the time it's a white man. And there are people that have been in the business for decades, and it was actually an interesting moment. We had this conversation with 2 very, very senior leaders in our company a few weeks ago, and they were talking about how they had known each other from different broadcast networks 25 years ago, and how they've just been bouncing around to different companies and have ended up at the same place again, and it was this very chummy conversation, and it was just really interesting to see in all of that, it still ended up being those 2 people on the stage. And for me, I think when I look at my place in terms of rising in the ranks, there's not a lot of parts of the business that are on a track. Like, as an actor, if you get a movie, that doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna book a series next, right? But if you are a development executive, there is a standard hierarchy. And when I look at that, and I look at, okay, how many women are there, how many people of color, how many queer people, it's like, I'm looking in the mirror, right? Or I might find a friend at another company. So I think for me, it's the system that's saying like, okay, you have a place at your level. You look great as a mid-level executive, and you should stay there as long as we can keep you there. So I think it's that more than anything.
All right, guys. So, do you have mentors? If so, how did you get your mentors, and what is your relationship like with said mentors?
One is somebody that I used to work for, and another is somebody that I actually do business with, that I share a bunch of business with. So that's how I found them. The relationship is interesting. One is more of like a godfather. One really more feels like if I have a big existential crisis, I'm trying to figure out where I'm going in my career. If I have a question about my marriage, I call him, And then the other is definitely he's a peer just 5 seconds in the future. And he's been such a great shepherd of saying, hey, here's how you move this way. Here's how you communicate this thing. If you're going to be working in a space that really, wasn't built for you, here's how you should try to navigate it without having to sacrifice who you are as a person and your feelings and thoughts on the culture and where that can be moving. You can still keep that part of you while still making success within the traditional structure, right? Because we're not all going to be fantastic creators and actors. Unfortunately, I have to work sometimes within that sandbox, and that mentor has been priceless in that regard. So yeah.
I have different mentors for different things. I think that's I don't really consider them mentors, but more my inner circle. And I feel like I know what kind of questions to ask each one. Kind of like you said, if you had a question with your marriage, you'd go to that specific person. Like if I'm having an interpersonal issue, I know that that's one particular person. If I'm having an issue that has to do with money and trying to figure out what's the best numbers on something, that's a different person. I feel like though my very first mentor I'm so nostalgic of. So this was like when I was 17. I feel like I peaked in high school, which is okay. But so again, I was 17 and we were in this leadership class in high school, and they were for students who were running organizations around the high school. And this guy came in and we had his resume in advance. He was a former CEO, a chairman of the board. I mean, his laundry list was so long and so impressive. And I remember when I walked in and he stood at the front door in this high school classroom and shook every single person's hand when he walked in and was so polite and so kind and wanted to know how each of us was and get to know our lives. And truly it blew my mind because this guy, I'm telling you, I don't really get starstruck with people in suits that are impressive. I'm like, oh my goodness. And really, I reached out to him, and now I've known him for over 10 years, and he's the kind of person where it's almost like having another grandfather. He's been long retired out of the business, and he's just supporting his family now. But whenever I have something that I'm really proud of, I feel like I take it to him and I'm like, hey, by the way, like I got this new job, or by the way, I'm negotiating this deal. And he's always someone who's just like, I'm really proud of you. Make sure you're still thinking about your family and thinking about God, and really just keeps me grounded. But I'm really, really nostalgic of my very, very first mentor, because he really showed me what that mentor-mentee relationship is like, and it was something that was really natural and organic and lifelong for as long as we have him.
I remember Lynn Whitfield, when I worked with her on Hit the Floor, she offered to me, she goes, hey, I would like to offer something to you. Would you be willing, would you receive it well? And I'm like, yes, Lynn Whitfield, you can offer something to me. And she was just very kind and caring, and many women have been like this, and directors. Director is my next journey and path in life, and every director I've worked with, every director who I've ever shadowed, all have been so wonderful. But the one person for me who was a dear mentor was my manager. And I met him when I was 19. I was back in college in Nashville at Vanderbilt, just a freshman, and he wanted to work with me. He's like, look, if you're serious about this thing, I really want to rep you, come back out to LA. And I'm like, oh God, I did that thing. Am I going back? And I did. And he represented me for a decade. He passed this year in March. It was completely unexpected. And I kid you not, my first thought after thinking about the fact that he was gone was, well, I guess I'm done. That's how much of an impact he had on my life. And the reason he had that much impact was because his advice always came from a moral, ethical, God-fearing kind of a place. And I remember he's the person who told me when I really wanted to audition, or when I was testing for a specific role and I really wanted to go in, and you know, before you test for a role, you have to sign your contracts, right? And he's like, Logan, I really don't think you should go in on this. And I was like, wait, what? I've never tested for something. This is a big deal. And I was in my early 20s. He goes, yeah, I don't think you should do it. And I asked him why, and he says, well, the other actors, they're guaranteeing 13 out of 13 episodes. And they're only guaranteeing 7 out of 13, and they're not budging. You're also the only person of color on this show. And he said, and he's a white guy, he said, I think you're worth more than a black face on a white show. And I went to the heart. Never heard anyone say anything like that to me. And he stood to also gain money from this, you know what I mean? But he always saw the bigger picture, and that was just one of many stories I have of him. And so, you know, obviously this isn't the end for me, but what I do take with him, even though he's gone, and what I think makes a great mentor is even when they're not in your life, the things that they're saying are constantly playing in your mind.
I haven't had one person, you know, throughout my 11 years, you know, in LA. Maya Angelou used to say that she had rainbows in her clouds, and that's kind of how I feel. I've just had, you know, pockets of light, you know, along my journey. God always has sent somebody to help me. So I haven't had like one consistent, you know, person or mentor, but whatever I've always needed has always been in the house, or has always been in close proximity. And I've been able to kind of absorb mentorship from folks when they didn't even know. You know, I used to just spend hours watching YouTube videos and interviews from artists that I, you know, admired. But even like folks like Issa Rae has been a great mentor. Even when I didn't directly like reach out to her for advice or questions, she was a great model in terms of, okay, she had a successful web series, you know, and she was able to springboard. And so I've modeled, you know, a lot of the things that I've done, you know, post Giants, from seeing Issa do it, you know. And so for me, that's been a form of mentorship. And then I've just always surrounded myself with people who were smarter than me. And so in many ways, my friends are mentors, like Vanessa. She is an actress on Giants, but she's also a really great writer. And she went back to school, got her MFA in creative writing. She was assistant to the showrunner on Ozark. So she was in that room for like 2 or 3 years. And then she started writing on a TNT show, and now she's writing on a CBS All Access show. And so even though we're peers, I go to her for writing questions like, yo, I'm working on this script, read this, or look at my story structure, or what do you think of this? And so, and even today, I was gonna wear a jacket with this outfit, and I called my style mentor, Apuje, and he was like, nah. He was like, you're mixing spring with fall. Don't do that, bro. And so I've been, what's that?
So introduce me to him, he sounds
I got you, bro, I got you, yeah. So I've been blessed to just have really creative and smart people around me.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you said, because that's what Olivia and I always talk about, like peer mentorship, and it's just, you know, massively important. It's one of those things that, especially in this business, right, where there's like a groundswell of people of color that are all kind of the same age. You know what I mean? There's so many of us now that weren't here 10, 15 years ago. And it is like, how do we navigate all these scenarios? Because they're often so new for all of us. So having that sounding board, being able to text the homie and say like, hey, has this ever happened to you? And really know that they're gonna give you advice with your best interest in mind is like invaluable.
Oh yeah, our text thread goes back years. And I've never deleted Years. And I just scroll and I'm like, okay, how did he phrase that? What was that? One phrase?
You know what's crazy about what you said? Like, that there are a lot of people of color who are around the same age and like maybe 10, 15 years ago weren't out here, but maybe actually were, but weren't connected. And now, because there are so many projects, and I specifically think about after parties, that's where I meet a lot of people, you know, and we're all invited to that specific party, celebrating that specific show or whatever. And I just feel like the connectivity is different now.
So I think it's also important to realize that we're in more seats, right? So I always talk about sellers as people with mixtapes, fondly, but truly think about it. It's like if you're someone who has an idea or a pitch or a story or your talent and you're aspiring and you're looking for someone to buy into it, we've always had that. We've always had truly inspiring, talented, vibrant, beautiful people on that side. But when you look and you see, oh, we have financiers, we have people that are venture capitalists, we have lawyers, we have buyers. It's like now that you really are seeing us in all of these different roles, we have publicists, like we have people that can really shore us up in every single category. I think that's why you've started to see a lot more of like the groundswell and the upward mobility too.
Yeah. And there is something going on in terms of the artists that I didn't see, and I don't know, maybe because I was new to the city and I just wasn't connected, but there does seem to be more of a renaissance of sorts, happening amongst the Black artists, in town. Mm-hmm. And I've experienced it, I feel it, when I go out, and even just on social media, the amount of support and the amount of just celebration that exists when one of us gets a victory. It really does feel like a rising tide is lifting all of our ships.
I have one. What advice would you give to those aspiring to your career path?
I would say you just gotta create. Just start creating. I think one of the best pieces of advice that I've gotten is don't get paralyzed by perfection. And oftentimes as content creators, we wanna just get it right before we pull the trigger. And sometimes you just gotta jump in. You gotta jump and build your wings on the way down. Throw shit up, throw shit against the wall and see what sticks. I think that's the best way to learn. It's the best way to really find your voice. Like I often say, I had to fail first to create a giant because I had a show called Fail that nobody knows about. But then I did a few other shows, and then I did a show called First, and that was the first show that I had up on Issa's channel and ended up getting a development deal, but I wasn't the creator of that show, so I wasn't included in that deal. And so eventually I did Giants, but if I hadn't done all of these other projects that didn't necessarily push me to the place that I'm at now, they were still a part of my learning and my evolving. I think ultimately helping me find my voice as an artist. And so that's always my advice, is just go and make something. I don't care if it's a short film, it could be 1 minute, 2 minute, make a web series. If you got, $100, like figure it out, shoot it on your phone, but create. That's what's most important.
I always say that my favorite part about being a development executive is giving artists a safe space to play. And I say that because, like I said, I grew up as an artist myself, and so I understand the ethos and the pathos and the mind frame and all the stuff that goes into being an artist and to cultivating your craft. And so I would say if you want to be a development executive, spend time with artists, and not just in the vein of film and TV. I think that's way too literal. So if you're someone who's like, I want to make TV shows, I want to buy TV shows, and you say, I've just been sitting at home watching Netflix all summer, I would ask you, did you go to any museums? Have you listened to any new music? Do you read any poetry? I think it's really important to allow yourself to be inspired by a variety of art forms, and not just things that are recent. I think Hollywood also does this thing where we have short-term memory loss, where we talk about things that are like, it's either a classic show or something that's happened in the last 3 years, and that's all that's ever talked about. And I'm like, I'm a nerd, so I'm like, I want you to know your film and TV history. I mean, surprise me with the things that you've been reading and studying, and also know of other executives. Like, I want you to be able to tell me whose career from Fox do you admire? Like, who's someone who started CBS? Do you know that person? Like, I want you to be able to talk to me about what other people are doing and have done. And then we can talk about how you can find your place in it. But I really think that understanding your history is really important before you kind of try to barge in. So our last question is going to be a blend of two. So the first part is, old Hollywood institutions don't often award Black talent in great numbers. As a result, do you think about new ways to define success that aren't based on the kinds of Hollywood accolades that often overlook Black talent? So this one's about defining success in different ways for our community.
And this question is, are there any steps you're taking to intentionally build community and Black Hollywood. So they're a good mix. Yeah, who wants to kick it off?
I'll kick part of it off. So I have my newest tattoo is a little tattoo here. That's a plug, little plug. And it represents a lot of things, but one of the most practical meanings is I'm running a group called The Plug that Jermaine is a part of. And it's for Black development execs and managers and agents. There's some attorneys and some creative execs that work at production companies. But the group is almost 100 people, which is crazy. And all of us are based in LA, which is also crazy, because if you were to multiply it by different cities, and it's specifically entertainment driven, but the whole goal of the group right now, it started off as a brunch, and there was only less than 10 people there, right? And it started because a few different reasons, but one, just little story, I was actually trying to buy a project from you. Tried to buy a project from you about 3 years ago, and it was one of my first buys, and I was so obsessed with it, and I loved it so much. And Jermaine calls me, and he says, "You got it, we're gonna celebrate, it's gonna be amazing." And I'm like, I can't wait. Truly, I was at home, it was a Friday, I was so excited. Literally an hour later, Jermaine calls me, and he goes, "Yo, so HBO put a pilot on the table, and can you guys do that?" And I was like, we can't do that. And the deal just slipped from my hands, and they just skirted off into the sunset. And I was really, really sad. So
I was too, for the record.
Yes, I was really sad. And I was sad for many reasons, but one important reason is because the show was all about women and people of color, and it was super queer. And I was like, who is taking that from me? Who? And many months later, I was at a party in Miami, and I was talking to this young Black woman, and she was telling me, that she worked at HBO, and she was the development executive, and she worked in comedy. And I was like, first of all, I do all those things. You're my counterpart. By any chance, did you get this show? And she goes, yeah, and she was so excited, and I was relieved. I was like, the fact that there is a Black woman, first of all, at that network doing that thing at the time, and has the show, I was grateful that she was shepherding it, truly. And also I was like, how do we not know each other? Our companies are also in the same family. How have I never run across you before? So that's one of the reasons why we started meeting each other, is a lot of people think there's no Black development executives, and there's actually so many. And I think the way that the group is moving forward, right now, the emphasis is making money and getting people jobs. It's if there's an opening available, making sure the group knows. If there's a project available that someone's not going to have anymore, letting the group know. If there's talent that's in town that other people want to meet, throwing it to the group. If there's an event that other people can go to. It's more about making money than it is about just attending events, because like you said, after parties, we see each other a lot, but I'm like, but when we're there, are we actually making business happen? Because we haven't been doing it on the golf course in the country clubs all this time, so I want to do it right now on email chains, and the ultimate goal is to make it a searchable directory and database that's either an app or a website that, depending on, it doesn't matter what city you're in, or, if you're actually in the industry or a student or whoever, can access this information, because it's a really valuable list. And for instance, if you were to be pitching a show, and wouldn't you want to know where all the Black people are?
It'd be very helpful.
Right? Right. So that's what I'm working on right now.
Yeah, that's great.
That's dope.
And to piggyback that, actually, just to take that story, and really kind of, I think it's like moving with intention, right? And that's the thing where when that pitch went out, we went to maybe 5-6 buyers, and intentionally I made sure I called the people of color, the execs were people of color.
In advance.
Yep, I said, this is the pitch that we're taking out, I'm bringing it to you. And at all of these places, of course, these executives had people that were higher up than them that they needed to bring into the room, right? People that needed to be there to validate, whatever the pitch is if they wanted to buy it. But to me, the intention is making sure that Olivia gets the credit, because ultimately, that is to kind of dovetail it, that is how I view success for us without, any of the awards, the accolades of traditional institutions. It's actually making sure, we all remember great 90s Black television. We had a plethora of it, and then it disappeared. And it's because there was no infrastructure. There was no level of executives of color that were actually growing and matriculating along with the great talent to make sure that they continue to thrive, not only not only in shows that were funny and entertaining, but shows that were authentic and fulfilled the purpose, right? And weren't just, I'm not gonna slander a show right now, but but weren't just, candy for audiences that weren't us, and that's because I think that's where we fell off the cliff a little bit in the 90s, where the people in the decision-making positions were just saying, well, what kind of shows do white people want to watch about black people? And that's how we ended up with some bad shows that didn't do well. And they said, well, okay, black TV doesn't work anymore. And they moved on. And now we're in a position where we can really start building with each other. And to the point of like, yeah, there's 100 executives. We have a little Christmas party. Issa throws her Emmy party. It feels like a family reunion now. And that is, continuing to grow that, so that years later, when there's a 20-something-year-old intern that says, I got to go home to take care of some family shit, you can call me, you can call Livy, you can call whoever and say, don't worry, you'll have a job when you get back. You know what I mean? Everybody doesn't have, I know that tons of kids of privilege have that, where they can go off and do what they have to do for a year and be a dilettante, or actually go handle something serious and come back and have this business waiting for them. Why don't we have that? That's the most success that I could dream for us in this business. I don't need statues and trophies, infrastructure and longevity and legacy.
Yeah, sustainability.
Yeah.
Yep. Whew. I would say for me, I've been really working to develop pipelines for the next generation of storytellers, and not waiting until I'm at a particular level to start doing that, to start being a mentor, to start helping a college student really shape their short film. So I've been working with the organization called HBCU in LA. So they bring out, I want to say this year, 30 interns from historically black colleges and universities across the nation. They get the opportunity to intern across the industry, from the agencies to networks to production companies. They get free housing. But the thing that was missing from the program was that the students would come and they would get the corporate side, but they were missing the creative side. And so we came in, my team from Giants, and we worked with this program to implement workshops on writing, on directing, on producing and acting. Then the students were then able to pitch a story to us. We chose a story that then went into production. And so the writer who pitched the story worked with our writer's room to then develop the script. Once it went into production, we worked with the producers to produce it, to location scout, to crew it. And then we brought in other industry mentors. So we brought in an Emmy-winning director of photography. Panavision donated all of the camera equipment. These kids shot on cameras that I have not shot on yet in my career, on my projects. But it was just a really rewarding experience to see them be able not only to get that experience, but now they have access not only to me and my team, but these other, industry vets that will be here and will be folks that they can reach out to. And so there's a community, brewing already that's, I think the next generation, if we're in the middle and we have the folks above us, we're already starting to foster that relationship where when they come up, they already feel like they have a family and mentors when they get here.
And if they have run into someone like when you ran into Will Packer and he said,
Yes.
did you make a movie? They literally, it's such a big group of them. Every single one of them can say,
Yes.
yeah, I did.
I
And
did.
here it is.
And
yeah.
there it is. And
Yeah.
it's professional, it's polished, we screened it at SAG. It was written, directed, produced, and starring all HBCU students.
Wow.
Yeah.
For me, when we talk about success in our community, and in Black Hollywood specifically, I appreciate the fact that we're actually all sitting here because we are Rising Award winners. The first ever that there was. And Shadow and Act, since literally I can remember, has always really supported me. And I think that a lot of times actors come to LA and when they get a little bit of success, they forget, Ebony and Essence and the people who have always, supported them from the beginning. And I think that for me, success is remembering where we come from and remembering the people who have always cheered us on from the beginning and to consistently support them. For me, it's looking at the things and the people and the sources that have always been here and always supported us, and making sure that they're coming with us on our journeys, and that we're not just, going to things like the Emmys and the Oscars and looking at them as our barometers of success, because not everyone gets to be in this circle. Like, this is a really special circle, and I'll always look at it as that. So yeah, that's how I'm measuring my success.
Amazing.
I love it. One thing that just popped into my head was that story that ran about Halle Berry stopping to talk to Black press. I think that's so important, that we can't get to a place in our careers where we look at our institutions, our media outlets as second best. That we must always look at ourselves as being premier, the destination, the place we have to stop by. If we're taking out a pitch, we gotta, stop by this particular office or talk to this executive, or if we're doing an interview, we gotta talk to Shadow and Act. E can wait, the Hollywood Reporter can wait, Variety can wait, I gotta talk to Shadow and Act. And if we can get to that place, I think that is when we'll have the type of stability, sustainability, and infrastructure that will allow this not to just be a renaissance and not to be another 90s moment that blows by, but something that we can look at 50 years from now and say that we were part of building this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This was so great, you guys. I really
have like a tear in my eye.
A lot.